Hi everyone, and welcome to our webinar. So thank you for joining us, and thank you panelists for joining us as well. So we've got Chris Catania, Matt Harris and Mel McCarthy. So a great panel here, and we're looking forward to the discussion on influencing change through positive team culture. So with the recent market fluctuations, the mining industry in Australia has done an incredible job staying operational. But with commodity prices starting to show signs of stability, it's time to start focusing on building a positive working culture and influencing our people to deliver the best operational performance. So this webinar is going to focus on how to influence change within our organisation by embedding a positive team culture. And the goal is to really assist you in building a resilient and adaptable workforce that can navigate through the current uncertainty in the mining industry and then also position themselves to grow as the market improves. So just in the way of how things are going to run today, we've got an hour session booked in. So we've got about a 35 minute panel discussion with each of the panelists, and they'll be followed up by a Q&A from the audience. So with regards to the Q&A, down the bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A button. If you click on that and post a question there, I'll be able to facilitate the question asking at the end of the discussion. So as everything rolls through, please feel free to add things in, and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. So just introducing the panelists here today. So we'll start off in no particular order. We've got Matt Harris. He's a principal consultant and the director of CTY. So Matt Matt started the company quite recently, a few years ago, and the company helps to deliver production targets by unlocking the value from from joining the relationships between production and planning teams. During his time as a technical and operational leader within the industry, Matt developed a true understanding of the challenges faced on each side of the fence. He came to realise that many of the daily frustrations his teams were encountering were caused by miscommunication or lack of context, and were often easily alleviated by embedding a stronger, more collaborative team culture. So welcome, Matt, and thanks for joining us. Next up, we have Chris Catania. So Chris Catania is the General Manager of MEC Mining. Chris is a mining engineer with over 14 years of experience, and having worked in commodities such as zinc, iron ore, copper, gold, iron sands and coal, he's certainly seen a lot of it. He has a high level of technical and operational expertise, as well as a project management and leadership experience in open cut mining. Chris demonstrates strong skills in short, medium, long-term scheduling across the suite of software packages as well. So he's well adept in dealing with the technical situations, and he's now transitioned to a leadership role. So I'm very interested to see what Chris has to say there in terms of building the culture up in a technical space. Chris has a track record in operational roles ranging from mining engineering to mine planning superintendent in metals and coal, so both domestically and internationally. He's recently spent the past 2 years spent a few years ago in Kaz Minerals at the Aktagai copper mine in Kazakhstan, so as the planning superintendent. During his time in Kazakhstan, Chris managed a large mining engineering team and was responsible for the development of their mine planning systems and the preparation of the reserve statements. So welcome, Chris, and again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And then finally, we've got Mel McCarthy. So Mel is a professional mentor, but she's got the grassroots in the mining industry as well. So she worked up from an operator through to GM level, which is, so again, very different background to our other panelists. But yeah, again, very excited to hear what she's got to say. So Mel McCarthy is committed to supporting technical people become exceptional leaders in business and in life. Trained as an engineer, Mel has worked her way up from operator to executive level in the resource industry over 20 years and is now a professional mentor. She helps technical people get out of their head, learn how to play the game and do what they love, and make a difference for others and create exceptional success in life. Melanie has operational and executive level experience in the resource sector with expertise in safe underground mining and processing, stakeholder relationships, leadership development, relationship building and contract negotiations with Chinese customers. So yeah, welcome, Mel. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks.
That was a mouthful, so I hope I got all of that right.
Spot on.
Beautiful. So without wasting too much time, I think we'll get straight into some of the questions, and I guess the topics today we're focusing on will be around resilience and change management, and then we might look at a bit in the inclusion space as well. So I think with the COVID interruption to our, I guess, normal business operating practices, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what you guys have come up with in the last few months and how to deal with the workforce, and how do we still encourage them to be motivated and deliver the plan. So start with you, Mel. So why do you think resilience is so important?
Well, I guess the sector that we've all worked in is it's all about the uncertainty, and we're, the whole world's experiencing that now. So the situation that often resource sector industries face is this fear of the unknown. And I think, like if we think of popular culture and, watching movies about the future, generally it's all bad. And I think the resilience is so important for teams, because as a leader, you need to allow people to feel safe about the future. That's often thought to be that it's going to be worse than it is now. So your ability to communicate and create that vision in your language is so critical, such that people can actually hold on to that vision of the future that is a positive future, because it may well be not a negative thing. It's going to be better than it is today. But often we don't, naturally we'll just go to what's going to be the worst thing that can happen. And often technical people think of worst case scenarios and try and mitigate for those. So naturally our brain is trained to actually do that. So if you can, as a leader, help create that positive vision of the future, then that's part of how you build your team resilience, I reckon. Yeah,
no, for sure. Anything to add there, Chris?
I think that's a pretty perfect way of putting it. I think we, you have to have that face as the leader of, obviously you've got to show that positivity in the outlook, but you still have the responsibility to manage the potential risks and that worst case scenario. And I think that's where a lot of technical people find that the most challenging. And I think even talking to different clients, they have that struggle at the moment, is they've got to have that positive outlook and give that motivation to their team, whilst also planning for the worst case. And it's very hard to feel authentic when you're selling a positive message and planning for the worst, when your whole foundation is about managing risk. It's a strange change for people to do without some sort of entrepreneurial background, where you're used to selling a more of a positive outcome.
Yep, for sure. And Matt, anything to add from you?
No, it really covers it out really tightly. And I think at the moment we find ourselves we deal with the uncertainty every single day of the week, and it's just in different forms. And we tend to, like Mel was saying, we tend to find ourselves wanting to have something going wrong to feel that stress almost. And it's being able to unplug that and reframe that to be, this is what we do. And some of the most of the technical and the production people I talk to are bored if they're not solving a problem. So I think it's really about that frame that we put around it, and determining why is it that we want to feel this way today, and what are we going to go and kick the goals on. So I think definitely making sure we hold the right conversations with the team is really part of keeping that on track.
Sure. That actually sort of brings me back to you, Mel. I've seen a quote of yours, or I'm going to paraphrase it. Looking for problems often causes more problems. Is that close to what you're thinking?
I mean, I'm exactly like Matt described. When I floundered in my career was when things were going well and there wasn't any problems to solve. I think so if you're faced with this uncertainty, you've got to, I think you, in terms of an example, I can probably speak to that. Did you want to move on to the next question, or?
Oh, if you've got an example for the resilience side of things, for sure.
Yeah, so I was leading a team, so a small mine in Victoria, and I took over as GM, and we only had 18 months reserves, and the mine had been only meant to last for 2 years, but we'd been going for 10. And so everyone was fearful. Like we had only low grade material ahead of ourselves, and we hadn't found the next deposit. So the fear of the unknown in a small community that depends on jobs and what have you for 250 odd people was just incredible. So to be able to, I think in terms of resilience, often people, they'll just be fearful of what the future is. But if you can show examples of things that have worked in the past, and if you fully believe in the capability of your people, which as leaders we do, we've got the incredible people to solve this. Look at what we've done in the past, and if you can continually bring up that evidence to show them, that this is completely possible. And as you chart the future, obviously that communication and coming back to say, look, these are the milestones, and actually celebrating them, and just that constant communication is critical, because otherwise people just be head down, bum up, thinking, still scared about the future, and they just need constant reinforcement that we believe in the team and we're going to get there, kind of thing. And yeah, we did. We found another deposit, and the mine's still going. So yeah, I think that's completely possible. But people need that faith in the team, and if the leader has that, then that's going to come out. And if you're communicating that constantly, that's really critical.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great example, and I think Chris, you've probably got a similar example in taking over MEC quite recently, and having the coronavirus pandemic hitting, the workforce dependency on yourself and leading the direction. So I might let you talk a bit more to it, but probably just more around what sort of tactics you might have used to start that communication process, because that seems to be the key right now.
Yeah, thanks, Ditto. I think like Mel sort of hit the nail on the head though. There's that storytelling. I think people, even when they've just had, I think we'd gotten through the first couple of months of COVID and everything had changed, and the guys had done a fantastic job, and we'd achieved some great things, and actually been pretty good couple of months, which everyone had expected to be far worse. And you almost have to make people stop, have a look back and look what they've just achieved, and remember that what they did was fantastic, and the team is very capable, and we've weathered storms before, and this most recent one you've been doing great, and there's light. And I suppose as soon as that happens, people start to gain a little bit of confidence, and it's amazing how quickly that diminishes though if you don't continually give people that feedback. It's an odd scenario how easily people forget how well they've done. You have one bad month during a difficult time, you forget that the last 6 months you just killed it. And so, you've got to bring people's attention back to their successes and promote those successes. However difficult it is, as a leader, it's your responsibility to not forget it, or let anyone in the team forget it either.
To Chris, just a question: Would you consider it as a leader to manage maybe a team downwards, sideways, as well as upwards, or is it just the team directly under yourself that you'd be looking to try and motivate? No,
I think the thing is though, as a group of peers, it's very easy. Anyone can get stuck in that perspective, and even our side of things, Ditto's aware, obviously, with MEC's position, but you've got a board that are detached from the day-to-day operations of a business, or you've got different stakeholders in whatever mine, Matt's at a site delivering a project, but there's stakeholders in that mine that needs to manage upwards inside of the team, and also peers on board, and everyone has that same struggle. And I suppose if you've got the visibility to be able to see some positivity and help bolster that part of the group, I think anyone who has that aptitude for leadership or that desire should be able to help in all directions. Leading a company, I think there's always owners. We've got directors we need to keep aware, and because there's a disconnection from the day-to-day operation with what they do, it's your responsibility to sell that positivity in both directions.
For sure. Matt, is there anything you'd like to add there if you've got an example or some tactics that you might be using to try and get that resilience embedded.
It's for me, it's unfortunately, you go through and you reflect back over your career, and you see the times where things haven't gone wrong or have gone wrong, and you've actually got through it. And I think that reflection, like Chris was talking about, is absolutely spot on, because when you actually do take the time to reflect on where you've been, where you've come from, and although in the moment you find yourself struggling, or there might be things mightn't be going quite as planned, the fact is that often a lot of plans are only valid at the time of publishing, and it's dealing with and finding ways to help people deal with the anxiety and the stress that comes from not having that certainty. And I think the only thing that I'd really add is that it's about being able to call each other out and be there to support whether it's the peers above or below. At any point in time, different people are going to need someone to help them see the bigger picture, see why they're doing what they're doing, and see how they actually can achieve the goal at the end of the day, whether it's moved or not. Those goalposts will move, and it's about making sure that we're all there heading in the same direction together.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's the building the alignment there, so you are heading in that same business direction. So I think that's a common theme amongst all of you. So I guess to summarise the current discussion so far, we've got celebrating successes, we've got learning from your failures, you're taking the opportunities, and then also supporting and motivating the team around you. So there's a feeling of safety about the future. So I guess that if there's anything else to add there from any of you guys, otherwise I think we might even move on to the next theme.
Yeah, sure.
Beautiful. All right, so today more than ever, most complex collaborative teams have members who are working at a distance from one another. So team members may be working in offices in the same city, or they may be strung across the world. So I'll start with you, Mel. How can we create remote collaboration and build a robust and adaptable team culture during uncertain times?
So I've been speaking a lot to clients and other people about this remote collaboration piece, and they're finding it really hard if you haven't had that initial relationship building in the office environment, and then everyone is now distributed. How can you actually connect with people? And I think so this whole staring at Zoom all day is completely foreign to our brain. So the initial thing and the most important thing is the relationship building. So if you're part of a team that there's members in that team that you need to influence to achieve the outcomes that you need for the business, you need to go and put in the effort for that relationship building. So I've often heard a rule of thumb is that if you're leading a team and you've got team members, you actually have to invest twice the amount of time as you would normally in person. So for example, if you would spend normally an hour with someone in a meeting in your office as the normal catch up, now that if you're distributed, you actually have to spend twice that amount of time to make sure that you're connecting and getting deep on how people are going. So I think it's all about relationship building, and if you haven't got those strong relationships, you need to go to work on them. And I don't necessarily think that this online, I think you need to pick up the phone. Like that might just be a generational thing, because I know that younger people just stare at FaceTime all the time, but I work with people all over the world, and unless I'm listening to what they're saying and focusing intently, I actually miss stuff. And I think this looking at the screen is it's too distracting for your brain. So that would be my advice, is pick up the phone, and really listening and relationship building is going to be fundamental before you then start to have that effect in collaboration and achieving whatever you need to achieve.
Yep. Is there anything you'd like to add there, Chris?
Yeah, well, I suppose MEC having a workforce that obviously work in seconded and project spaces, all across the globe essentially, and then we've obviously got project teams in offices. This is not a new thing for us. Obviously, we have a team that you might only see periodically for a while, and other times they're in the office for a couple of months. And so, most teams, when you're in one place, you get through that that forming, storming, norming process, and everyone understands a bit of the culture that they've developed. But for us, it's always been one of those challenges where we have to be very well aware, and we have to maintain different methods of keeping that engagement. And so we've had people who are tasked with specifically doing that and holding those relationships and keeping those ties to the business. I think it's probably the interesting point for me actually is that a lot of companies I've spoken and clients I've spoken to, they're having these challenges, but they already had established teams. And there's a lot of companies that have moved to say, we're just going to work remotely now, and that's going to be our new method. However, they've never really had the experience in managing or building a team that is so dispersed. And so although they've got good trust and they've built team resilience and a culture already now, I think what's going to be interesting as we go forth is that other companies that have sort of adopted this principle, as they go through the normal attrition and new hiring, how that culture, if they can maintain the culture they've built, or it actually will degrade depending upon how much of the original team formation is there. I don't know how well, if a company's not well versed and they haven't got managers who are experienced in trying to build that space through a dispersed workforce, whether they actually have the ability to maintain that sort of cultural standard that they're used to. I think that's going to be the most interesting fact going forward with the COVID challenges in the next year or so, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And Matt, I'll go to you, but I think the perspective from a site point of view would be quite interesting as well, if you're able to share something there.
Yeah, look, I've been fairly fortunate to be able to continue to travel within Queensland and the Basin, and look, really what you do see is an entire new level of respect. And I suppose when you think about some of the things you see in the States, some of the issues we've had in the southern states as well, what we see on site is people are really quite patient, respecting these extra precautions that we actually need to have in place, and they really do see some of the bigger picture and the benefit, because we don't want to become that stat on the news. So it's actually been interesting also to talk to some of the clients about how we actually performed during this period. And there's a large majority of them have actually seen an uplift in productivity from their people, just purely around trying to make sure, there's the people that we said we're going to come to work, we now know they're coming to work. We actually do know and can plan for the downtime in a lot more effective way, and it's made things a heap more structured on site, just because we now have a rhythm and routine as well with the way we work with COVID. So it's been quite exciting from that point of view. Logistics are an absolute nightmare from a internationally perspective. It's really about taking the time, and I think we get the wins when we pull out the people that we can work with, and we can put our hand up and we can ask the questions and say, who should we talk to? Who do we pick up the phone to? It's amazing. I don't think anyone ever has a problem with helping someone else out if you just ask, and that's the people in your team will largely all be there for the same reason, and they might not be able to help you, but they'll point you in the right direction generally, and that's been a really positive aspect of seeing how some of the bigger businesses I work with actually work together across the greater Australia to actually deliver some really great outcomes. So I think it's from a site point of view, definitely been lucky, definitely has the challenges, but it's actually been a really good thing in terms to reset some of the expectations and culture around how we interact with people.
Yeah. And just adding on that, Matt, the change management process. So what have you seen from a site level, and is that being generated at a site level, or is it flowing down from the upper management?
I think it's. I think there's certainly the corporates houses are really owning a response to this, and I suppose there's in the last kind of 5 to 10 years has been an escalation in terms of corporate citizenship. The license to operate really does come into this, and looking after your people in your team when you've got a workforce of 5, 10, 20,000 people. It really is paramount, and the families with those people and how we keep the industry rolling is actually supporting not only the communities we work in, but also the greater state and the country as well at the moment. And then you get the really exciting thing is that you get the same message from a leader on the front line as what you get from a GM of an operation to if you get a head of message as well. They all want to make sure that people that are in their team are going to be going home, that we don't actually cause anyone's family any impact from continuing to work. But on the same token, we're helping those smaller businesses, we're supporting the community, and we're supporting the state and the country with continuing to provide some kind of input into the sector. So it's really reassuring to see that.
Yeah, and I might flick to you, Mel. You've had a bit of involvement with external to the mine industry. So is it the same sort of story over there in different industry, or what are you seeing there?
Oh, so in terms of what Matt just described and the care for people, so that's obviously prevalent throughout. I mean, I'm down in the southern state now, but yeah, just with the change and the rapid, I guess, change to remote learning, working from home, and also the impact of having kids at home to be able to homeschool as well. So so it's a very similar theme across other industries. And I guess that the topic around change management and collaboration, I think if there's a way I can share with people what worked for me was actually getting out of the sector. So when I was leading the mine as a mine manager, getting board positions outside of the sector to actually bringing that different intelligence back to the resources sector. So then that just expands your brain and gives you that, the different ways of thinking that other parts of the community and the economy think. So I'm a director of a water corporation at the moment, and yet, our people and our communities are the most important thing. But I think the difference in the resource sector as opposed to external is just the time frame. So often the time frames in the resources sector are a lot shorter. The planning horizons are a lot shorter because of the uncertainty. So are we actually thinking now that we're going to go back to the way we were, or in the case of longer term organisations that might have 10, 20-year plans, we can actually see the future a lot easier. So I think, if people can think what are their time horizons and how is that affecting how you're thinking about, is this going to be a change for sort of the long term, or are you only sort of planning 2 years ahead because that's all you've got left, kind of thing, thinking that we don't have to worry about beyond that. So I just think if you can get a chance to get out of the sector to bring in intelligence and just how long are your time frames, how long are you planning in terms of this disruption that's happened to us right now.
Yep, no, that's great. Chris, I might move on to a new question with you. And moving back away from the sort of the COVID environment and moving back towards the how you actually create a team culture in itself. So in dynamic businesses, and I'm going to use MEC as the example here, but in dynamic business models where the team is continuously changing scope of work and locations, I'm talking as an individual is changing scope of work. So what challenges do you face in building that fundamental team culture?
I think it really depends. I suppose the methodology that MEC applies is, you target people who have that same, I suppose, the same drive. Most of the time you sit down and you see if you can find someone who'll have that cultural alignment and skill set. And then, if you've got that sort of group with the same capacity, then you just need to set the environment and standards for them to be able to operate and reform sort of high performing groups. The positive from a consulting firm is nearly every project, you need to set the foundation for a high performing team, which essentially means you perform very well for a shorter period of time. And then they'll also break apart and go away. And so what you're actually trying to do is part of our business is we're essentially setting the scene where we've defined the standards and we've allowed people to form very quickly and be specialists in different areas to allow for a high performing team to form, complete a project, and then move on to the next thing. Now, the only challenge that you always have with that is people get tired in having this spurt of high performance and downtime, but there are also particular professionals that have that sort of maybe find that drive from it and that excitement from that type of thing. And the variety is what, or the challenge to be able to perform at that level is what pushes them. And so we actually, from our side of things, have to be very selective about who we bring into the business. Because you could have someone who is very, very good at maintaining a steady ship. The good time type scenario we're talking about right at the beginning, there are people who are very good at the incremental improvement and that steady state of just maintaining that quality output. And there are people who like startup operations, for example. I'm one of the startup type operations. It's you go from 0 to 80%, and then you pass it to the other people who like to take that 80% and fine tune it till they get close to that 100% final piece. And I think that's for consultants, or people who have a lot more of that, faster change influence, it's very important. But you do need to give those people a continually challenging environment. Otherwise they get tired. Or they get tired of the situation. Whereas I think in any of those forms, it just changes the time frame, though, the standard you put forward, and obviously the expectation and vision of where they've got to get to. Similar to what Mel was talking about, you've got to look further out for certain more steady state operations and give them that further vision and set the standard. And normally a good performing team will actually form their own culture. It's a bit more organic. If you give them what they need and give them the guidance of the bounds, teams tend to form quite well, as long as you give enough clarity about where they're heading and what they need to deliver.
And I'll flick to you, Matt. Similar sort of situation with yourself, I suppose. You're constantly in and out joining teams and trying to create a high impact in the short time that you're there. So what's your experience in I guess, how do you join a team and then add that value and build that effective CTY context?
Yeah. Thanks to that. Look, one of the biggest walking into any situation, I suppose, if you come in like a bull at a gate kind of scenario, we're going to end up causing friction and uncertainty. And like the natural response, and I used to be like this, sitting on the other side of the fence too. You bring a consultant in, a contractor in, and they rock up in your office, and your first question is, their first thought is, well, the boss has just sent them to come and see me because haven't been doing the right thing. So, you've got to. It's all about approach for CTY. It's all about understanding. It's all about understanding the why. And for many of the people I work with, their why is very individual, or it could be very team based, and it's around, let's just seek first understand. So one of those really simple phrases that's been around for a long time. It's it really does help build a good understanding when you can listen and really inquire about, why do you think things are the way they are? And often people get sick of saying the same thing over and over again, but and that's when they give up trying to change or trying to deliver a different outcome. They haven't been heard, and maybe they haven't been communicating either. So it's really really trying to derive from an individual's position, a team's individual position, where they actually can and want to go, and then understanding what it is that they actually need to go and get there. And I think if you can up that, if you walk in and take the time to listen as a leader in any business, and understand where your team's at, and then try and provide them some kind of foresight on where they want to go. What's in the middle is really the easy stuff. So it's getting the either ends of the bookends sorted.
Is there anything you'd like to add there, Mel?
Yeah, no, it's all, I totally agree. It's all about, again, listening and understanding other people's worldviews. That, to me, that's been the fundamental thing that sort of supported me throughout my leadership roles and now is actually if you're having a conversation as a leader and in your brain you're joining the dots and thinking about the advice that you could give in that situation, normally that's the cue for me to not say anything and to continue to ask questions and continue to listen and be interested in where people are coming from. So I think that's, yeah, exactly what Matt said, which is, where are people coming from? What do they want to achieve in their life? And how can you actually help them achieve that at the same time as achieving the organisation's goals? And often once they align, things work out perfectly the way that we want them to. So, yeah. So I'd agree with that.
Excellent. And so what sort of tools or strategy were you using to I guess, align from the upper management all the way through to the coal face, we'll call it? How do you get your leadership team on board and your supervisory team on board to really drive home that message?
So sorry, was that to me or to Matt?
Yeah, sorry, continuing with you, Mel.
Oh, okay. So again, going back to what I said at the beginning, it's all about relationship building. So if you can really understand people as human beings rather than cogs in the wheel, I suppose, that are going to be ensuring that the business will meet their KPIs. I think the focus on KPIs that drives everything, that drives people's remuneration, bonuses and what have you, the focus on that is not helpful. And if as a leader we're focusing on people and what they want to achieve in their life, and we're actually helping them do that, then everything will just naturally come. And I think as a leader, if you've done the work and you've invested in yourself and you understand what makes you tick, when things aren't going well and your KPIs aren't being met, you're still focused on people. You're not focused internally and worried about, how's this going to look? Things aren't going well, kind of thing. So I think that's a key point, is that you're actually focused outwardly and not inwardly. And if you've done that initial work, then generally that comes with practice over time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And Chris, you mentioned before that you, with the consultancy type team, that you have a group which is the same sort of alignment and has a similar understanding to start with. But how do you identify those strengths in the individuals when you're doing the recruitment process, or once they're actually embedded in the team? How do you see those strengths and then try and I guess use that person for their strengths?
Well, that's a big topic. It is one of those challenging points though with anybody. Our interview process is probably a bit different to normal. It's a lot more of there's less structure to it. It's a lot more of a general conversation about trying to understand where people have found happiness in the delivery, or some things they've been successful, or they've found success, and understanding what they consider to be a win for them, what they're trying to do and their aspirations. As people share more and more, you start to understand how they see challenges, how they see the world and what's in front of them. So it sort of is that listening process right from the beginning. I think it's important for all managers to really understand how those people tick, And also, you know, we try to be very frank about, you know, this is an ever-changing environment. It is ambiguous. I can't tell you what will happen in X period of time. It will be challenging. It will use your skills and it will push you. And you know, how do you feel about that? And as people start to understand, you know, the examples and the storytelling that you use to demonstrate it, you can work with them very easily to understand whether that's going to fit their style of operating, or whether they can find comfort or excitement in it. There's almost two direct things. Someone gets very excited about it, or someone gets a little bit more timid. And it's, you know, sometimes the timid is not a bad thing. I think it's just a matter of making sure that you can identify some of their skill sets and help show them where they could add value, and where MEC could add something to their whole career and life, as a fit. And I think, finding that understanding of somebody very early is the most important piece. We tend to know our people we've interviewed very, very well before they've seen an offer, and they're normally surprised when we get to that step, because it's not really a normal formal stage. It's unique.
Yeah, for sure. Matt, I might switch to you. The similar question there is how do you identify those strengths and then really try and develop the strengths, and so they use them to achieve the common goal?
And everyone, I would say everyone's different, and it really is the challenge to just let the people that you're working with actually stumble across these things themselves, you know. And that's the real challenge for us, because someone can tell you that you're really good at something, and you just don't want to believe it, right? Like, a lot of us don't actually enjoy the praise or actually believe it, you know. And standing up to realize where your strengths are is about listening to the feedback, and just as much, you know, the old saying, you got to play to your strengths. Knowing that they're there and using them when you can is actually really important. So, I suppose I don't have a short, succinct answer for you, Tito, on how you do that. Mel's probably more of to the tools for that, but I know that there's certainly an approach you can use to, you know, just in terms of that, when you are listening to people, you can actually hear them. You can actually hear them more excited about some things that they do than others, and you can see the energy and the expression in their face change when they talk about things that they're actually good at, as opposed to things they're struggling with. And, you know, they'll avoid the things that they don't want to do, right? So using those cues is the key to identifying that for people. And if you become good at reflecting on your own self, giving yourself that, you know, standing on the balcony and watching what you do, there's certainly things that you'd look for is, when do you feel most uncomfortable? Yeah, that's probably not one of my strengths at the moment. So,
well, Mel, it sounds like Matt's he's put some high praise on you. So, same question: is it about identifying weaknesses and trying to build those?
No, I don't think so. No, it's all about strength. So, and often, and it's in language, exactly what Matt said, and language and behaviour. So and I guess if you're leading teams and you have an expectation that's not being met or delivered, then it's the constant being curious about why is that? You know, how must the person see the world such that this has happened? And then the more and more questions you get answered, the more clear it becomes that this just might not be the right fit for them. It's not playing to their strengths, and there may well be somewhere else that they fit within the organisation. So I think the whole concept around bringing sort of where you're weak up to try and improve. I think it's, people should focus on their strengths. They're going to have more fun at work. It's all about having fun, right? We spend a lot of our time at work. So the more you can do that you really enjoy and that you love, then that you're going to be happier. And that's, we all want happy teams. So I think that's pretty much spot on with what Matt said.
Beautiful. So if I was to summarise, we covered a lot just then, so bear with me. So we had investing the time and taking the time to listen. It's probably the most focal point there. Then we had, I guess, taking the time to actually listen with intent as well. I had a quote there I liked from Chris, the forming, storming and norming. I hadn't heard that one before, so that one's going down in the quote book. And then, yeah, taking the time to care for people and genuinely care as well. So it's a very fair point. And I think that's going to open up the connectivity there as well. And then time horizon you spoke about, Mel, with understanding what sort of time horizon you're actually working on. So if it's a short-term, long-term, and then basing your planning around that and your messaging around that. But yeah, everything seems to be all around alignment and understanding where the people are coming from, and then trying to get them to understand where you're coming from, and two-way street communication. All right, we are getting close to the Q&A time, guys. So if you do have any questions, please throw them into the Q&A box, and I'll be happy to ask them on your behalf. Otherwise, I will continue asking away at some of the questions that I have written down. So we'll move on to the inclusion. We'll start with you, Mel. So what are the sort of the common barriers that you see with inclusion in the workforce?
So I always struggle with this word. So I mean, what do you mean by inclusion? Can you explain what you mean by that?
I think inclusion for me is getting people involved and actually working as a part of the team. So it's not getting the favoritism of the similar personality types, anything like that. It's how do you bring the other perspectives in?
So I'd be interested to hear what Chris described about his rapid team deployment and that those intense, I guess, engagements in the high performing teams, because having, and I think in the sector, because it is so small and everyone knows everyone, and you end up employing people that are like you end up with people, and then you've got that risk of groupthink. So I think including people that have diverse views is quite challenging. And how do you, so I'm almost posing a question to Chris here, how do you have a diverse team that's going to be obviously more, it's going to take longer to embed that culture in that team if you've got a diverse group of people or different backgrounds. But then it's going to obviously be higher performing when you get to there. So yeah, I mean, my experience in employing, I wouldn't necessarily employ for cultural fit. It was really about the skill set and bringing diversity in. But when there's a pool of the people that arrive on the desk are all pretty similar and everyone knows everyone, this is a challenge. I don't know if I have the answer. So I'd be interested to know how Chris does it, actually.
Well, I don't think it's I think there is ever a perfect answer. I suppose like the most, I suppose, productive and value adding solutions that we've come up with in projects historically, we've got people who are fantastic, expert coal miners and had that experience. And so I suppose when I think about diversity in mining, we have some reasonable cultural diversity and some gender diversity. Everyone thinks diversity is that. But then experience diversity and skill set, the spectrum of skill sets that you bring an underground coal miner and let them give perspective on what they understand when they look at a metals solution.
Yeah.
It's really quite, they think about it in a whole nother facet. It's something developed as opposed to as extracted. And so as you give the opportunities to mix a few alternate perspectives where there's a different level of experience, or someone's worked through a bigger organization or a small gold miner, they have a hugely different approach to something. So letting them collaborate on a solution that would fit based upon the successes and failures they've seen through their history, I think letting that team find that collaborative piece is the most value adding from our side of things. And that's that you know, you have to throw it all out there in the brainstorm. Like I think yesterday we were doing that for a gold project in the office. We had 6 people, all different backgrounds. I think we had 4 different countries represented, probably about 8 or 9 different commodities covered between the group, and it's all just throwing ideas at how to develop the value out of this gold pits. And it's quite nice to see because of the perspectives and the challenging. So everyone being able to challenge what seemed like the most obvious solution with perspective, and making sure that the environment allows them to feel like their opinion is included and valued. That ensures that people bring stuff to the table that you didn't really think they even had. It's in there. You've just got to give them the environment to bring it out.
Are you finding that the remote way of doing this and the chat functions actually enabling those ideas for people that might not have spoke up in, say, a conference setting due to, you know, if they're not feeling comfortable in the culture yet, but they get a chance to contribute? And then, are you finding sort of more rapid rise of ideas from the bottom to the top necessarily?
I think yes, because it takes away that that point where, you know, whoever's the loudest in the room gets to talk, right? You've taken away that volume control. I think the only thing that I've found we had to be very cautious with, and I've been quite mindful of, is the certain mindsets like to, you know, engineers, I think if it is they like to think on something and really mull it over before they put something forward. They like to have thought out all the bits and pieces, right? And so you have to, if they're quiet also, you get the quiet, people become quiet as opposed to throwing more in. You need to give them the time to let it marinate a little bit and for them to conjure up the full way that they can express it, because they don't have as much ease in just drawing or playing with something as interactively as they normally do. So some people who are actually quite good at sharing feel a little bit inhibited, and the other people that, although normally have a lot to share but are quite quiet, they're sharing more. So the dynamic of the team changes, and making sure that people don't lose their identity in a group is actually the counter that happens at the moment.
Great.
Thanks, Mel. It's good questions.
Yeah, that's great questions.
Take over. Hey, Matt, I've got a question here from the audience. It's a good question too. It's how do you manage difficult employees but talented employees? So the ones that can greatly affect the productivity of the team but are often hard to keep, but also hard to do without. So I'll pass over to you.
Look, there's this great there's a very quick video from Simon Sinek doing the rounds on LinkedIn at the moment, again for like the millionth time, right? It's about performance versus trust. It'd be a really good one to go and have a look at as well. But basically what it's saying is that you can have a really high performing person that you really trust is kind of the utopian, and they're generally a leader of a group. But if you've got someone that's a high performer but nobody trusts them, they're the people that you don't want as a part of your team, because they're actually quite destructive. And you know, if this employee is actually part of a larger team, it's actually the decision that you need to make is, you know, how do we, you know, first understand and go and do the listening with that person and understand how they're thinking and why they are the way they are, and try and see if there's some recognition of what they're doing, and talk about their strengths. You know, like it's help them understand that the rest of the team as a whole, and we are in a team environment generally, that it's not quite working, and you've got to be quite frank about those discussions and be able to tell someone that. And often, and I've found in the past that just nobody's had that discussion before. You know, everyone's been kind of hands off, don't want to go near those type of discussions. So at least make sure we've tried and had that. But you need to remember that they may be hard to do without in the short term, but there always seems to be a solution. And all of us have come and gone from jobs, and people have come and replaced us, you know, and it happens quite quickly.
Yeah.
So, you know, like, don't be too afraid to do without them. But on the same token, it's really important to go and spend the time to at least know from yourself that as a leader, you've spent the time and you've tried to understand what's going on. You've tried to help them and coach them through what their current situation is. Because until you actually go and listen, you may not fully understand what's causing that behaviour either.
Yeah, excellent. Just in the interest of keeping time, guys, we might start to round things up. But if we can get some key takeaways from the panelists, anything that you'd want for our attendees to take away from this, I'll start with you, Chris.
Well, sorry, broad topic. I was just thinking on Matt's point there. I think just one final piece. As a leader, you actually have a responsibility, I think, to, if you see that with those people, it is part of your responsibility to share that and help those people grow always. And I suppose that's part of that listening piece, which I think has covered the whole topic. Being open and listening and understanding the people that you have in your team, and giving vision to them so they can understand where you're going. I think if they don't have that clarity from you and you haven't given them that sort of relationship build, then you're not going to get the value out of them. You're not going to get the buy-in, and that's where you get discretionary effort from people, where they understand that you're invested in them, and so they'll be invested in the objective and the vision you put forth. If you don't give people that, then you're doing them a disservice, and you probably need to reflect as a leader on where you need to be better.
Yep. We'll go to you next, Mel. Any key takeaways?
So, yeah, agree with everything that's been said. I suppose I'd like to leave the audience with that just in remembering people who are appreciated will always do more than what's expected. So if we're listening, if we understand where they're coming from, if they feel safe and they feel like they belong to the team, then they'll always do more than what we expect. So yeah, I'd just like to leave the audience with that.
That's awesome. And Matt, finally.
No, it's been a great session, and look, the biggest thing is, you know, people like everyone's been talking about. If we can listen to them, give them a sense of purpose, you've got a great team that if you can play to their strengths, it becomes really easy to have a good team. So making sure that we're recognising and ticking off when we have those wins as well is the things that we just don't do often enough. So yeah, that's going to be my takeaways.
Excellent. So thank you, panelists, and thank you everyone for joining us. This webinar has been recorded, so we'll be sending out the link after today. So anyone who registered will receive an email, and and feel free to share it onto your teams. And same applies for you, Matt and Mel. That'll come through to you guys as well. So once again, thank you, Chris Catania from MEC Mining. I've got Matt Harris from CTY, and we've got Mel McCarthy from Mel McCarthy Mentoring. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to email myself or Amelia or any of the team at MEC, and we'll be happy to answer those or direct them through to Matt or Mel. In the video that comes through, there should be some contact details for each of the panelists. So feel free to also contact them directly. Thank you, panelists, and we'll finish up now. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Matt.
Cheers later.
Okay, thank you.